McCoy goes crazy and jumps through a time donut to the past where he does something to make the whole friggin' Enterprise, Starfleet, and everything to where it never happened. Kirk and Spock have got to chase him through history and put right what once went wrong. Why does that sound familiar? Anyways, join the crew as they visit the city on the edge of forever. Hit it.
Hey!
Lots of extras and principals this week, but only one real major guest star. Playing Sister Edith Keeler is the one and only Joan Collins. Born in Paddington, England, and an actor since she's 9 years old, Collins is best known for her role as Alexis Colby in 205 episodes of hit series Dynasty, spanning the entire 80s, and not just chronologically. She had some other genre credits too, like Fantasy Island, Space 1999. She was the Siren in 2 episodes of Batman. She was in Empire of the Ants, and of course, who could forget the movie Can Hieronymus Merkin Ever Forget Mercy Hump and Find True Happiness, where she played the beautiful and elegant polyester poontang. That is not a joke. You can look that up. Thing won a Writers Guild of Great Britain award. The 60s, am I right? And as of this video, she's still kicking around. In fact, in 2015, she was invested Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire for services to drama and to charity, making her the only knighted, or damed, I guess, guest star in the series. But enough about that. Let's get into the plot. We join the episode already in progress. The Enterprise is orbiting an unknown planet and tensions on the bridge are high. We're under red alert and something is goosing the ship something fierce. Scotty says stuff is overloading, but Kirk says keep going. He talks to Spock about how much more of this they need to endure, and Spock says they should have all the space potholes plotted in a few more orbits. Then Sulu explodes. While they're getting Bones to the bridge to put him back together, Scotty asks if we're really going to keep going with this crap. Spock says exploding helmsmen are the price we pay for science. But the upside is we get our first hint as to what's going on. Those potholes, they're ripples in time, Spock says. McCoy hits the bridge and checks out the recently detonated Sulu. Looks bad. Heart flutters and whatnot. Gonna have to use some cordrazine, whatever the hell that is. Kirk has doubts, but when McCoy gives Sulu the bump, he pops awake with a smile big enough to make you worry he's of the body again. All seems well until a ship hits a particularly deep pothole and catches McCoy while he's trying to put his hypo away and makes him inject a whole friggin' bottle of something what only a couple of drops was able to reboot Sulu into Spore Monkey mode. He seems down for the count until he screams and plays a short monologue directly to the camera about killers and murderers and how he's not gonna let them get him. It takes a potent pharmaceutical to bust the fourth wall like that. He jumps in the turbo lift and is gone. When we come back from the opening credits, security guys are looking for McCoy, but no dice. Cut to the transporter room, where crewman Kyle ain't seemed to have learned yet not to stand with his back to the door. As many times as this Yutz has been knocked out in the show just so far, I don't gotta tell you what happens next. McCoy takes his hand phaser and beams out. On the bridge, Spock and Kirk are talking about how cordrazine turns you into a paranoid whack job that would make even Art Bell do a double take. Then they get the call that they found Kyle unconscious and that McCoy has beamed out. Spock says that the transporter was focused on the center of the time distortion for some reason, and Kirk says let's go get him. Kirk, Spock, Scotty, Uhura, and Ensign's Rats and Ass beam down to what looks like some ruins with a glowy-looking, poorly drawn circle in the middle of them. Spock scans them and says they're 10,000 centuries old. They start looking for McCoy, but Spock and Kirk are checking out the circle. Spock discovers that the circle is what's making all of these time potholes, but he don't know how. While this is going on, we see McCoy creepsing around, staying out of sight of the search party. Back to Kirk and Spock, and Kirk asks, what is it? Apparently the circle was waiting for that and starts talking to our boys. Says it's the guardian of forever. It's its own beginning and its own ending. Cryptic stuff like that. It also says it's got to talk like that because you guys are kind of stupid. Yeah, even you, Bullcut. Then the Guardian starts showing them stock footage of Earth's past in the whole of the circle. As they're just about to bin her, McCoy shows up still screaming about killers and whatnot, and Spock puts him down with a nerve pinch. The Conqueror has started playing on the Guardian, and Kirk asks Spock if they can use the Guardian to go back in time before McCoy injected himself. Spock says this thing is blazing through the Criterion collection at ridiculous speed. It'd be hard to get the right year, much less the right day. So Kirk asks the Guardian if he can slow this down once they get to Season 1 of Star Trek. It says, nope, I got fast forward and I got stop. That's the only two buttons I got. I see that look, pointy ears. I'm still smarter than you. Shut up. They keep watching, and we're in the cowboy time now, and Kirk talks about how neat it would be to walk through into history. Spock starts recording all these great movies he's just been letting go up to this point, and suddenly McCoy comes to, bum rushes the Guardian, and jumps through and disappears. The Guardian confirms that he's in the past now, and Uhura reports that she was talking to the Enterprise just now, but she's lost contact. Guardian's like, yeah, you guys didn't see Back to the Future? All that stuff, like your ship and everything, has been changed by H.G. McCoy over here. After a commercial touting the delicious and nutritious taste of Doral cigarettes, we get a captain's log outlining Kirk and Spock's plan to watch the movie marathon again and see if they can go back in time further than McCoy did and be there to stop him from giving young Biff the almanac or whatever. Uhura and Scotty point out that even if they get the right date, how are they going to find one guy on the whole planet? Kirk says if they don't, you guys got to try too. If worst comes to worst, at least you'll be on Earth and not here in the worst movie theater in the universe. Spock says it's almost time. On your mark, get set, leap. In the little-known 6th borough of New York, Mayberry, Kirk and Spock materialize in an alleyway. They look around and determine that they're in the middle of the Great Depression, around 1930. You ever show up to what you think is a costume party, but you're the only one in costume? That's what our boys are experiencing, as people kind of stare at the guys in weird clothes and the one guy wearing elf ears. They make it to another alley where someone has weirdly put out a lot of clothes on their fire escape, and in a barrage of whimsical music cues, Kirk sneaks up and swipes a couple of full outfits. As they try to make their escape, they run into the heat. Kirk starts over-explaining like a teenager who's been caught trying to sneak out, saying Spock looks like Spock because he's actually Asian, and when he was a kid, got his head caught in a mechanical rice picker. Spock don't seem offended that his looks have been attributed to an industrial accident. Well, the cop ain't having it, and as he's starting to arrest our boys, Spock lays the nerve pinch on him, and he and Kirk take off. They book it all in one block and duck into the basement of the 21st Street mission. After switching to their stolen duds, they discuss how they're going to find McCoy. Spock says that there's a theory that time is fluid, like a river, and maybe they're in the same time river as McCoy and will end up being carried by it to the same place. Long shot, but we'll see how it pans out. Spock laments that there's all kinds of video in his tricorder of what the Guardian was showing them both before McCoy went back and after, so he should be able to figure out what McCoy changed. But he can't watch the video without tying the tricorder to the ship's computer. Seems like a bad design to me, but what do I know? I'm just a possum. With an iPhone. Well, Kirk asks if he can rig one up with current tech, and Spock, well, he don't seem too optimistic. Just as Kirk is pulling some, well, if it's too tough a problem for you reverse psychology, the lights snap on in the basement, and in walks a lady covered in soft focus. She asks, what's with breaking into the basement? Kirk admits that they were running from the cops after stealing their clothes. She don't ask what they were wearing before they stole the clothes, but that's probably out of self-preservation. She don't threaten to turn them in, but offers them jobs cleaning up, which is handy because Spock's going to need a healthy line of credit at the neighborhood Radio Shack if he's going to build the world's first ever computer. After a hard day's work, our boys grab some soup upstairs and have a seat next to Scruffy Steve from Central Casting. Edith strolls in and takes the little stage there. Scruffy Steve says that she's about to sermonize, which would make sense, but it ain't what you're expecting. The gist is that basically, things suck now, but hang in there, because there's a future coming where we're going to harness atomic power, explore other planets, discover new ways to feed the hungry, all kinds of great stuff. It's at this point that our dear captain falls in love with Edith Keeler. Spock says, yeah, lucky guess. As he and Spock are leaving after dinner, Edith stops Kirk and compliments their work on the basement. Then, when Kirk says they don't have a place to stay, says there's a free room in her building. What are the odds? Time passes and we see the apartment our boys are staying in. Spock's got the full Dr. Frankenstein setup, including a Jacob's ladder and theremin noises. We pan over to see he's working on the tricorder with a butter knife. Kirk comes in with some groceries and Spock mentions that he's going to need about a couple of pounds of platinum. They proceed to have a married couple fight about money. Interrupting the discussion is Edith knocking at the door. She says she's got a line on a job for him with good pay, but sees the friggin' Colossus the Vulcan project over here that Spock is trying to build in the apartment and asks what gives. Spock says what the hell and tells her the truth. Cue the wacky music. Later, Kirk and Spock are sweeping up in the dining room when Spock spots a guy working on a clock, using some precision tools. Tools he needs for his thing. So later that night, Spock cracks the combination lock on the toolbox and yoink! A time passes dissolve and Edith finds our boys in the basement and dresses Spock down for stealing the tools. Spock is like, hey, I was just borrowing them. Kirk vouches for him and she says, well, if you walk me home, I'll forget the whole thing. But she does let on that she don't buy their cover story. Says they seem out of place. Can't put a finger on it, but she knows they ain't what they seem. Kirk has trouble seeing her because of the big-ass cartoon hearts that his eyes have turned into for some reason. As Kirk walks Edith home, she asks some questions about the two of them. Kirk says simply that they served together. She asks, considering their situation, did something happen? She tells him she wants to help. Kirk talks about how that desire to help is the subject of a novel by a writer from one of the stars on Orion's belt. Edith gets a case of the hard eyes herself. Romances have been based on weirder stuff, I guess. Cut to Spock, who still ain't returned the tools yet, still working on the tricorder. He sees on the little screen a newspaper story about Edith Keeler being killed. That's all he can see before the giant bedroom circuit overloads and cuts out on him. Kirk comes in and Spock says he's onto something, but Kirk ain't gonna like it. He fires it up again, and this time it shows a newspaper from 6 years in their future, where FDR meets with Edith Keeler. They don't get much farther than that before the bedroom circuit burns out catastrophically, though. Kirk is impressed that Edith is going to be that important in a few years, but Spock tells him about seeing the newspaper from this year that says she dies in some kind of traffic accident. Well, there's your focal point in history. One of these futures is the right one, and one is the one that goofed everything up. But the problem is, they don't know which is which. They gotta find out, so Spock starts fixing the bedroom circuit. Cut to outside on the street, and we see Scruffy Steve hanging out on a street corner while a milkman delivers some milk to a nondescript alleyway door. Like you do. Scruffy waits until the guy leaves and runs over to swipe the milk, and just as he does so, Crazy Balls McCoy materializes, still talking about assassins and murderers. Scruff is a tad taken aback, and McCoy spots him and demands to know what planet this is. Scruff takes off, and McCoy runs after him, screaming that he's not going to kill the guy. Very comforting, I'm sure. We cut to Kirk and Edith coming home from something, and Edith is explaining more about her radical optimism philosophy. We're going to go to the moon. We're going to make the world a better place. There's going to be 8 seasons of Firefly at least. Kirk is on board with all of that, and Edith loves that she's finally found someone who smells what the Keeler is cooking. Lots of violin music accompanies the dreamy eyes that they're making at each other. To totally kill the romantic vibe we got going on here, we cut to McCoy, who's caught up with Scruffy. He's convinced that Scruffy is, like himself, a victim of them. He's trying to figure out why the bad guys have gone through all the trouble of making a fake Earth, and why the hell did they make it the 1930s version. He starts fading and talking about how crappy the medical technology was back then, and gets really broken up about it, but he finally runs out of battery and collapses at Scruffy's feet. The Scruffinator, who does not value the camaraderie inherent in their shared struggles against all them murderers and assassins and whatnot, swipes McCoy's phaser and runs off, and immediately vaporizes himself. Hope he wasn't important too. Kirk comes home and checks in with Spock on how the repairs are going. Spock says he needs 2 more days. Annoyingly, Kirk seems to really need to know whether or not he's going to have to kill his girlfriend. The next day, we see that McCoy is up and moving and has found the mission. He finds Edith inside pouring up some coffee, and she's surprised and probably a little impressed with just how god-awful McCoy looks. She gets him a cup of joe and tries to get him to sit down, but he's still worried about them, so she lets him hide out in the back where there's a cot. Cut to Kirk and Spock looking at the recording on the tricorder. Apparently, after McCoy changed history, there was a growing pacifist movement in America, and that movement caused a delay in the U.S. entering World War II, giving Germany more time to develop the atomic bomb. They got there first, and used their V-2 rockets to deliver the bombs, and ended up winning the war and dominating the planet. Nice going, Doc. Problem is, that peace movement was founded by none other than Edith Keeler. Spock says all this happened because McCoy stopped her from getting killed. Kirk says there's a problem. He's in love with Edith. In a very understanding and sweet manner, Spock comforts Kirk, saying, Edith Keeler must die. A friggin' bungee jump would let the guy down easier than that. Sheesh. After a commercial break, McCoy's waking up on that cot in the back room, and Edith tells him to chill out. He still looks like hot pickle-flavored garbage, so stay in bed. He's a little disoriented, but he's talking a little more like regular old Bones now, so, baby steps. He introduces himself as Leonard McCoy, Chief Medical Officer on the USS Enterprise. And she says, yeah, okay, Doctor, you just sleep the rest of whatever off, okay? I'll check back in later. Back at their apartment building, Kirk runs into Edith, and as he goes up the stairs to talk to her, she trips and almost falls, but Kirk catches her. Spock sees this and later goes, nice going, Dingleberry. We could have had this whole thing wrapped up right there. Stop saving your girlfriend from dying, you selfish putz. Edith checks in on McCoy, and he's looking like a regular dude now, not all ragged out and far too moist. He tells Edith that he still don't think any of this is real, but he wants to pay her back for all her kindness by doing some work around the place. She says, we can talk about that later. I'm going to see a Clark Gable movie with my boyfriend. McCoy says he don't know who the hell that is, but hey, knock yourself out. And she leaves. As Kirk and Edith are leaving the mission later on, they cross the street and she mentions that they need to hurry if they're going to catch the Clark Gable movie. Kirk says he don't know who the hell that is, and she mentions that there's a Dr. McCoy who also doesn't know who the hell that is. At McCoy's name, Kirk gets really excited and asks about him. She says he's in a mission. Kirk tells her to stay right there and runs across the street back to the mission and yells for Spock. Spock comes out, and hearing Spock's name being yelled by Kirk, McCoy comes out too, and they have a joyous reunion. Yay! Now everything's gonna be just fine. Oh, wait. Edith, seeing the joyous reunion, starts across the street to join in the festivities. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy all see that there's a truck coming down the street, and McCoy moves to stop Edith, and Kirk holds him in place, but can't watch what he knows is about to happen. Edith gets pancaked. McCoy can't believe what just happened. He tells Kirk he could have saved her. Spock just says, dude, he knows. And honestly, this is all kind of your fault, so you may want to shut up at this point. Back on the Guardian's planet, Kirk and Spock come back through the portal, followed closely by McCoy. Scotty says they'd only been gone for a few seconds. Spock says, we did the thing. Being completely unable to read the room, the Guardian says, well, that was fun, wasn't it? Who wants to go again, huh? Come on. Uhura says the Enterprise is back, and Kirk says, let's get the hell out of here. They beam up, and we roll credits. Great stuff. This episode is on the top of most lists of the best original series episodes, and on the top 1% of all Star Trek episodes ever. And I agree wholeheartedly. And there are lots of reasons for that. Now, this show is already threatening to be an hour long with all the crap I have to say about it, so I'm going to try to keep this section under control. As always, let's start with some great lines. Far too many to hit them all, so we'll just keep it to the top 5.
A time portal, Captain. A gateway to other times and dimensions, if I'm correct.
As correct as possible for you. Your science knowledge is obviously primitive.
Really?
It's always fun to me when even Spock is seen as hopelessly primitive to whatever super powerful being we meet this week. But even better when that being is a real dick about it. Spock's look of, excuse you, at the Guardian is the piece de resistance, you know?
One day soon, man is going to be able to harness incredible energies, maybe even the atom. Energies that could ultimately hurl us to other worlds in some sort of spaceship. And the men that reach out into space will be able to find ways to feed the hungry millions of the world and to cure their diseases. They will be able to find a way to give each man hope and a common future. And those are the days worth living for. Our deserts will be...
A great look at the kind of person Edith Keeler is, why she was so inspired to found the peace movement we learn about later, and you can see why she's exactly the kind of woman that Kirk would fall in love with. I'm not wild about the delivery of this speech, though, I have to say. She says the lines as though she's just coming up with these concepts off the top of her head, rather than things she's believed for some time. The way Scruffy talked just before this, she apparently delivers speeches like this all the time. It don't feel like that listening to her here. Still, a great speech.
What on earth is that?
I am endeavoring, ma'am, to construct a mnemonic memory circuit using stone knives and bearskins.
I love it when Spock is allowed to be sarcastic. And I always like the trope of telling the person the truth, because you know they either ain't going to believe you or they ain't going to understand what you're talking about anyway.
Edith Keeler, founder of the peace movement.
But she was right. Peace was the way.
She was right, but at the wrong time.
Spock, I believe I'm in love with Edith Keeler.
Jim, Edith Keeler must die.
The moment the mission becomes tragic, no matter what happens. I love that we have a pro-peace sentiment here, but with a pragmatic qualifier. And honestly, the scenario is plausible. I wonder if anybody has done a book or something explaining that the alternate universe McCoy created when he went back was what led to the Terran Empire from Mirror Mirror. Seems like a logical progression there. No pun intended. Okay, some pun intended.
Deliberately stop me, Jim. I could have saved her. Do you know what you just did?
He knows, Doctor. He knows.
And the payoff to that tragic line just before. Shatner does a great job here. Without a line, you see all the pain, and then you see it transition into this numbness of shock where he's not even able to acknowledge much about the world around him. This is clearly the hardest and most emotionally traumatic thing he has ever experienced. And he had to be the one to bring it about himself. And Spock's line saying what Kirk couldn't is delivered perfectly. It's kind of hard to talk about what's great about this episode because so much of it is just outstanding. Aside from the interpretation of that speech I mentioned earlier, which ain't really that big of a problem, Joan Collins turns in an excellent performance. You just believe that she's doing the work she's doing because she cares, even for strangers in her basement and strangely wet paranoid junkies in space clothes. Especially this.
That coffee, it just smells wonderful.
You look terrible. You better sit down. Come on.
I can't. I gotta keep moving. I can't let them find me.
Oh, there's a cot in the back room. Look, they won't find you there. Come on.
There is something about how she just meets McCoy where he is, even if where he is crazy balls, and she does it without missing a beat. She's clearly had to speak whack job a few times before. But what a great character Edith Keeler is, and Joan Collins nails it. And performances all around were stellar. The progression as Kirk falls in love with Edith is really well done by Shatner, and Spock's constant attempts to prepare Kirk for the inevitable, but in a sympathetic way, particularly at the end, is subtle and well executed by Nimoy. McCoy's move from normal to energetic crazy to exhausted normal back to just plain normal again is great, and even though they only have a couple of minutes on screen together, D. Kelly and Joan Collins really have a good chemistry. There was a cut scene where even McCoy found himself attracted to Edith as well, but it ended up getting cut. But with how they are in their scenes together, you can see the potential there. And it makes sense. They're both people with a passion for healing and helping people just because it's right. This episode fires on all cylinders. I simply cannot say enough about it. The Goof. Just one or two things here. First, there's this.
My friend is obviously Chinese. I see you've noticed the ears. They're actually easy to explain.
Perhaps the unfortunate accident I had as a child.
The unfortunate accident he had as a child. He caught his head in a mechanical rice picker.
This is a really problematic line here. It was a product of its time, okay, fine, but good Lord. It's worth pointing out that this was a line added by Gene Coon, and Harlan Ellison hated it. And I can totally see why. More on Harlan Ellison later, believe me.
Time has resumed its shape. All is as it was before. Many such journeys are possible. Let me be your gateway.
This is such a weird line to come right after what just happened. It's almost comically tone-deaf from The Guardian here, and it gives you that cringe feeling of, dude, now ain't the time. And once again, we've met an extremely powerful being and an amazingly powerful and massively dangerous technology, and we're just leaving it there for any schmuck to stumble across and wipe out history again. I know we come back to The Guardian in the animated series and a couple of other places, but we just kind of forget about it here. It's a bit weird. Production. So I agonized for a long time about how much it is I was going to try to cover in this episode. If I tried to cover it all, it would be its own video, maybe even a mini-series. But if you want to see 4 words that represent a can of worms the size of a friggin' planet, you have to look no further than these 4 words right here. I decided that I would only talk about the stuff up to the airing of this episode. Things actually get a lot nastier after that, believe it or not. I did a lot more research on this episode than I have done for any other thus far. In addition to my regular research, I read Harlan Ellison's book, The City on the Edge of Forever, which Harlan actually signed for me at DragonCon back in the 90s. Not only does it contain the original teleplay Harlan wrote for this episode, but the subsequent rewrites that he did at the request of production, as well as a lengthy and, rather spicy essay about what he went through not only during the writing, but in the decades afterwards. Again, not getting into that part, but if you were curious, as fiery as Harlan can be, I tend to side with him on all of that. But that's neither here nor there. Suffice it to say that while the concept and the major story beats are mostly the same, Harlan's original teleplay was very different from what we ended up getting. And there are a lot of things I think are better in the original. Not everything, to be fair, but a lot. It should be noted that the unedited original teleplay, the first version, won the Writers Guild Award for Best Teleplay for Episodic Drama, not of science fiction, but of any kind of dramatic television. That's huge. And the WGA Awards are significant because this is other writers choosing the winner. On the other side of the coin, this episode as aired won the Hugo Award for Best Science Fiction Television Presentation that year as well. So even heavily edited, Harlan's story was undeniably something special. So what was different? Honestly, you should find Harlan's book and read it for yourself, but we'll hit some of the highlights here. First, it wasn't McCoy who was the problem, originally. It was a guy named Beckwith. He was a crew member who was also a dealer in an alien narcotic called the Jewels of Sound. One of his customers gets frustrated with him and threatens to rat him out, so he kills the guy. He gets caught, makes a break for it, grabs a phaser, and beams down to the planet. Kirk and the team beam down to get him, and that's when they find the Guardians of Forever, plural. They're these huge dudes in robes and long beards, and they guard the time vortex, a pillar of light amongst some columns. While Kirk and the crew are talking to the Guardians, Beckwith gets free and jumps into the time vortex. Same result, he changes history, but instead of the Enterprise just being gone, it's actually changed into a pirate ship called the Condor, and the team beams up to find themselves face to face with a brutal pirate crew. They barricade themselves in the transporter room and have to hold off the pirates while Kirk and Spock go back down to set things right. Now, the part with the pirates was not actually Harlan's idea. In fact, he hated it, but he put it in because Gene Roddenberry insisted that the ship itself has to be in peril. So Harlan was like, okay, fine, how about space pirates? Well, right away you can see how some of this stuff ain't gonna fly. Gene's idea of Starfleet personnel is basically that they're all enlightened and perfect and none of them would ever stoop to dealing drugs. Harlan's point was that's stupid, boring, and unrealistic. And besides, if that's the case, what's with people like Ben Finney? I mean, later on, there's captains who feed their whole crew to Roman gladiator fights and turn a planet's indigenous culture into a friggin' Nazi regime. And the less said about Captain Ron Tracy, the better. In the shadow of all that, is a drug dealer really that bad? But the real tragedy, I think, that comes from changing who they have to find from a genuine bad guy to a good guy just temporarily cuckoo, is that it made it so probably my favorite character from the original just doesn't make sense anymore to be included. When they're looking for Beckwith, Kirk runs into a legless World War I vet begging on the street. Goes by the name of Trooper. Had a sign that said, "I fought in Verdun." Kirk enlists his help to find Beckwith by being on the lookout for someone wearing weird clothes. A Starfleet uniform, but he don't call it that. And he pays Trooper in advance, who is astonished that Kirk has trusted him in these dark times. Kirk says basically, if I can't trust a man who fought at Verdun, who can I trust? Trooper is really touched by this. But later on, with Trooper's help, they find Beckwith, and Beckwith is going to shoot Kirk, and Trooper manages to get himself in the way and sacrifices himself to save Kirk. It's a really powerful moment, and I wish there had been a way to keep him in the story. But without the sacrifice, which wouldn't make sense with McCoy being the one they're looking for, the character don't really work. I mean, he could be in there, but that moment of sacrifice is very powerful and is the whole point of that character. Another thing that was different, that I really think was much better, is that when it's time for Kirk to make the decision to let Edith die or not, it goes very differently. In this case, Beckwith is actually the one who saves her. Seems weird, but they do address that. And they're going to have to stop him from doing so. But when the moment arrives and Kirk moves to stop him, he can't do it. Spock has to step in and do it instead. Kirk was going to save her. In that moment, he didn't care about the universe. He just knew that he loved Edith Keeler and he couldn't let her die. Not wouldn't, couldn't. Spock, ever the pragmatist, saw that coming and made sure that he was able to step in and do what had to be done. That also sets up a lovely epilogue moment where later, up on the ship, Kirk is lamenting that he didn't do what he had to do. And Spock has this great line, "No woman was ever loved as much, Jim, because no woman was ever offered the universe for love." There is so much about the character of Kirk that supports his not being able to stop Edith from being saved. He's not just romancing Edith because he wants something. She's not Lenore Caridian or Andrea the robot. He's genuinely and hopelessly in love with this woman. There's no way James T. Kirk would accept that there are only two outcomes here. She lives and everything goes to hell, or she dies and history is restored. That's what you call a no-win scenario. There's a whole friggin' movie dedicated to Kirk's refusal to accept no-win scenarios. In Wrath of Khan, David says to him, "You did what you always do. You turned death into a fighting chance to live." Now, you can say that's the Kirk of that time, but that's the whole reason he cheated with the Kobayashi Maru test. So no, he's been like that since at least the Academy. Another reason this works for Kirk is that we've heard him say a number of times how he's only got one female in his life, and that's the Enterprise. He laments in Naked Time that he's doomed to a life of solitude because of that. The whole no beach to walk on thing, right? It comes up in other episodes too, and will again. But here's a woman that actually completely steals his heart. He sees in her a chance to have that thing he's always accepted that he can never have. Now, they don't really say in the episode how long Kirk and Spock are in the city before McCoy shows up, but a later novel puts the number at 47 days. Point being, he didn't just meet her before he has to make this decision. Now, this is one of the things I like better in the aired version. In Harlan's original, they know Edith Keeler is the focal point they're looking for even before they meet her. And they don't meet her until later in the story. It's way more tragic if Kirk is already falling in love with her when they find out what has to happen. And her showing up almost as soon as they get to the past gives us a lot more time to see their relationship develop. But all of that to say that this is a new relationship, but well established enough to believe that the love they're feeling for each other is genuine. Kirk has an opportunity for something he never thought he'd have. A relationship with a woman he loves. Who's thinking rationally in that situation? It ain't like he's even given a thought to what would happen even if the solution had nothing to do with her. It's not like he could take her with him when all is said and done. He's still on cloud 9 and he ain't thinking about stuff like that. So in the moment, of course he's going to try to save her. But we can't have Kirk not doing the thing he's supposed to do. And I agree with Harlan. That makes him boring. A character without a flaw is boring. It's why Superman is boring without Lex Luthor, loved ones to be put in peril and or kryptonite. Yeah, in the aired version, it was hard for him to do the thing he had to do. But how much more nuanced of a character would there be if we finally saw the line he couldn't go beyond? The one thing that was surprisingly, even to him, more important to him than duty. Kind of like the trolley problem, yeah? When the one person is your mother, or in this case Edith Keeler, I'm sorry, it sucks, but the 20 people are going to have to be trolley food. Now, when Roddenberry told Harlan we can't have no drug dealers on the Enterprise, he did actually change it to McCoy. But here's another thing I like better in Harlan's version. It's just kind of a little thing. He had a thing where there were these animals in McCoy's lab being studied because they was getting younger. And it was because of being so close to the time vortex, but they didn't know that yet. At one point, the ship shakes violently while McCoy is taking a reading on one of them. The cage breaks or something, and it ends up biting him, and its venom has the crazy effect like the cordrazine does. Harlan's point was that having McCoy, the brilliant and exceedingly competent surgeon, accidentally inject himself with his own hypo makes him seem like a klutzy doofus, and I can't say I disagree. A lot of Gene's objections to Harlan's script ostensibly had to do with budget concerns, but considering the kind of animals they've gotten away with so far on the show, looking at you glove flower thing from the man trap, I can't imagine having an animal bite McCoy would cost more than $1.50. And from the moment Harlan got the assignment to write this episode until he turned in his final draft was about a year. Even Harlan cops to the fact that he was slow as balls writing that thing. But, to be fair, he had about a half a dozen other scripts he was writing too, and Gene really wanted him to write this, so it ain't entirely his fault. But I will say it was largely his fault. After they got the final rewrite from Harlan, the one that changed Beckwith to McCoy, they still had budget problems. So Gene Coon and Dorothy Fontana, who likened being asked to rewrite Harlan Ellison to being tossed a live grenade, gave it a shot. I should point out that there was a rewrite by Stephen Karabatsos after Harlan's original script was submitted, and it was so bad and Harlan hated it so much that he did the 2 subsequent rewrites for free. I can't find that rewrite anywhere, but Harlan referred to it as god-awful, so I gotta read it. Of the final rewrites, it was Fontana that lengthened the time that Kirk and Edith spent together, which, as I said, is something I do like better than Harlan's version. Now, there's conflicting reports on whether or not Gene Roddenberry did a rewrite. Bob Justman says he did, and that was the script they shot, but Harlan says he combed through the Roddenberry archives at UCLA and could find the Coon and Fontana rewrites, even the abysmal Karabatsos version, but he couldn't find even a page of a script that was in Roddenberry's typewriter's distinctive typeface. So who knows? Point is, it passed through a lot of hands, but the spirit of the story by Harlan Ellison remained through it all and produced what is easily the best episode of the entire series. Ruminations. All right, hang in there. We're almost done. So this ain't what you call a strong message episode. I mean, don't screw with the past. That's a good message, but with limited applicability. Before you fall in love with someone, make sure you're not going to have to kill them in a few weeks. Also good advice. Also doesn't really come up much. At least I hope not. But perhaps one of the messages that can be taken home with you after watching is that one person really can make a difference. I mean, it's a little subverted by implying that a person who idealizes peace and partnership and turning our warlike efforts into endeavors to better all of humanity ends up causing the friggin' Nazis to win World War II. But, as both Kirk and Spock say, she was right. Peace was and is the way. It's all in the timing, I guess. But this episode has given us some of the best character moments and exploration of not just Kirk and Spock, but McCoy as well, and gave us a truly marvelous character in Edith Keeler. It ain't hard to see why it tops so many lists of Star Trek episodes, not just of the original series, but all of Star Trek. It ain't just good science fiction, it's good television, and it's great storytelling. So there you have it, the city on the edge of forever. Are you guys familiar with all the Harlan Ellison stuff? What are your thoughts on that? Let me know in the comments down there. And while you're at it, what did you think about this episode? What's your favorite part? What's your take on why it resonates with so many even now, almost 60 years later? If you're digging watching stuff with your possum here, please remember to do the YouTube thing, the like and subscribe and all of that stuff. And if you're on mobile, there's a hype button down there too. Hit that a few times if you're feeling jaunty. No kidding, you can do it more than once apparently, but that's totally up to you. If you want to support us monetarily, consider joining the channel as a member, or head over to adstudiosmerch.com and pick you up a t-shirt or a mug or something. Christmas is coming up and we got some fun new shirts in there where they got me as like a Pokemon or something, and it's got Possum Friends are Awesome Friends in the Japanese on it. How about that? We also got some wrapping paper in a few colors and an ornament for your tree, your bush, your pole, whatever you're celebrating. Or if you're just looking to drop a quatloo or two in the tip jar, there's the thanks button down there as well. But honestly, you being here and listening to me yammer about Star Trek is enough to make me say thank you so much. It really does mean a lot to me that you're here. Next time, what happens when novelty fake vomit comes alive and flies around killing people? You know you've always wondered. Well, we'll find out next time with Operation Annihilate. Until then, Possum Friends are awesome friends. Take it easy, all right? Later.
Hey!